Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to see you. I'm really glad you could be with us again this week. If you were with us last week, you remember that we talked a lot about Jesus and the prayer that he taught his disciples and all of us. We call it the Lord's Prayer, and it's so perfect in so many ways. This week, I want to take us back in time to the Old Testament times, long before Jesus came to earth to live with us. And in those times, there was a very famous king named King David. David loved God, and he liked to talk to God a lot. But I guess maybe he thought just talking to him wasn't good enough. So he wrote a number of poems or songs, and he used those to praise God and to talk to God about all sorts of things. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I want to talk to you about Psalms. Now, Psalms is one of the biggest books in the Bible. There are 150 Psalms in the book of Psalms in the Old Testament, and most people think that David wrote at least half of them, and some other people wrote them too. Well, what are Psalms? First of all, I want to take a look at the word psalm because it's a little tricky. You'll notice that it has a P in it. Now, nowhere in the word psalm do you hear a P, but that's what the English language is like, isn't it? It's tricky sometimes. Anyway, these psalms sound a lot like songs, and in a lot of ways, that's exactly what they were. I think David decided that he needed to be creative when he was talking with God, so he wrote poems. Some of you who are in school have maybe studied poems or written your own poems. Or maybe when you're sitting at home doodling or with a device or a tablet of some sort, you maybe make up a song. There are lots of songs out there in the world, and now we have these 150 different psalm songs to talk about. Now, King David, way back then, had an old-fashioned instrument. It was called a lyre, and it looked a lot like this. Now, I would call this a harp, but even still, there aren't a whole lot of them around these days. So if we wanted to write a song, I wonder what kind of instruments we might use. If we were going to write a song to God, what would we use? I borrowed my granddaughter's music trunk, and I was thinking that we could get a really strong beat going with a drum. And you could make up some words to go along with that. Or if you're not a big drummer, maybe you want to use a tambourine. They're lots of fun. You can keep time with a tambourine. What else do we have in this big trunk? Or we could just have a shaker, and we could keep track of the music. We could add our shakes to it. If you were here with me, or I was there with you in person, I could hand out all these instruments and we could take turns playing them. Let's see what else. Look at this. Yeah, I think maybe one of you should play the harmonica. It's not my strong suit. How about, let's see, got a guitar here too. Well, that's pretty different from King David's harp, but I don't think God would mind. We could use any of these instruments, and that's something that I want us to talk about doing today. Oh, I've got music playing here that I'm not even trying to play. There we go. Now, as I was saying, if we wanted to write a song to God today, you might want to get a helper, somebody who has a pen and a piece of paper or something that you can write down, because we're going to talk about writing a psalm for God. Now, there are different groups or themes in the Psalms, and a lot of people think there are sort of 3 or 4 overriding themes in the Psalms. So that means all 150 fit into 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different categories. The biggest category is praising God. So many of the Psalms talk about how awesome our God is and how wonderful it is to be part of his world. Some of the Psalms ask God for help. people are in trouble or feel scared or don't know what to do, don't know what kind of decision to make about something, and so they ask God for his help. There's also another form of psalms which are asking God for forgiveness. So sometimes when we do things that we know we shouldn't, and we've talked about that before, we come to God in song or in poetry or in prayer, and we ask God to forgive the things that we did that we shouldn't have. But really, I think the Psalms take anything we want to God. We know that God is listening and looking out for us all the time. And so I think it's okay to take any of our thoughts to him in prayer or poetry or song or psalm. And I think that's what King David did. And we're going to be studying more of the Psalms in the weeks to come, but this is sort of what they're like overall. And I thought it might be neat if we wrote our own song for God. So here's where you need to get that big person in your life who can do some writing for you if you're not old enough to do it for yourself. And let's start off. So the first thing we want to do is decide what kind of a psalm we're going to write. So let's take praise, for instance. And let's start off, maybe you can write your own words. I'm going to suggest, Dear Amazing Awesome God. How's that? That's a pretty good start, right? And then what else are we thankful for, or why do we want to praise God? We could say something like, we know you know us better than anybody else, and you will listen to us no matter what we have to say. And then, in the privacy of your own space, wherever you are right now, or maybe you just want to do it in the privacy of your own mind, you tell God some of the things that you're thankful for, some of the reasons that you think you should praise God. Now, we may talk about these in the weeks to come, and you may want to work on them with your parents or a big brother or sister, and we can come back and visit them. And if you're really creative, you might want to make them rhyme, because some of our poetry rhymes, some of it doesn't, but that's just another creative idea for you. And if you want to, you could make it into your own song. You could take whatever instruments you have in your house and you could make a song. You could put your new words to music. And wouldn't God be impressed with that? I think so. King David must have been pretty proud of his Psalms. And I think you could be proud of whatever you've written as well. Because remember, we can go to God anytime and tell him anything, whether we're praying or rhyming or singing, whatever it is, God is listening. So that's your homework for this week. I want you to go forth and make a song for God. Mine might take a little bit of work, but I'll work on it and we'll check in again next week. Bye, everybody.